Daniil Medvedev. As quirky and brilliant as Daniil Medvedev can be for the most part, he can switch things up in the blink of an eye into something completely unhinged. With his unorthodox strokes and mental toughness, he's a Grand Slam champion and one of the game's smartest tacticians. But in 2025, at the Australian Open, let's just say, the net camera learned that even geniuses have their breaking points. During a tense rally, Medvedev lost a key point and immediately stormed to the net, where the innocent-looking camera sat perched just doing its job. Without hesitation, Medvedev raised his racket and whack! Slammed it square into the camera, sending it wobbling, sparking, and leaving everyone in the arena gasping. You could practically hear every camera operator in the world clutch their chest. The umpire gave him a warning, but after doing something similar in his second-round match versus Thien, the ATP had bigger plans, fining him $76,000 for unsportsmanlike conduct and equipment abuse. But did you know that wasn't the first time Medvedev had a beef with a court camera? Remember, he did something similar at the Southern Open in 2021 when he literally kicked the camera with his foot like a big old bully. Classic Daniil. He always makes new friends and even more enemies everywhere he goes. On the bright side though, the cameras got more screen time than usual, though they probably retired immediately after. Victor Ionescu. Victor Ionescu, a big-serving Romanian, who, for a brief moment, managed to make Wimbledon feel less like tennis and more like a bar fight. During his 2010 third-round match on the hallowed grass of Court 18, Ionescu was heckled relentlessly by a few rowdy fans. At first, he tried to ignore them, but after a series of jeers and mocking comments, he finally cracked, and cracked in the most unsanitary way possible. Ionescu deliberately foot-faulted to end the match, walked over to the stands, and, in full view of everyone, spat directly at the spectators. Not once, but multiple times. Let's just say, not exactly the kind of souvenir fans were hoping to take home. Wimbledon officials wasted no time, fining him $15,000 and sending him on his way, probably with a warning to avoid the souvenir shop on his way out. If tennis is supposed to be the gentleman's sport, Ionescu's performance was more pub brawl than polished pro, and no matter how annoying the hecklers were, he should never have taken the bait. Alexander Donsky. You probably don't know Alexander Donsky unless you happen to be the guy he drilled in the head during a match. It all went down in the second set at a modest challenger event in Barletta in 2025. Donsky and his doubles partner Banthia were leading 4-3 and were serving at deuce. Since there's no advantage in doubles at challenger tournaments, the winner of that point would win the game. Donsky crushed his forehand return, but Agostini was able to control the volley, which just made it over the net and bounced twice before Donsky could reach it. And then it happened. In a moment of frustration, Donsky smashed the ball straight into the face of the unsuspecting Agostini, who was still celebrating winning the point. Just imagine how incredibly painful that must have felt. Even though it looked like it wasn't intentional, the umpire didn't even bother deliberating. Donsky was defaulted on the spot, and deservedly so. He was later fined and probably added to a few players' personal do not practice with lists. The ATP's take was clear. Tennis is a lot of things: competitive, emotional, and intense. But turning it into dodgeball? Not recommended. Donsky has kept a low profile since, probably because no one wants to be on the business end of his forehand ever again. John McEnroe. John McEnroe. Even if you've never watched a full tennis match in your life, you know the name. 7 Grand Slam titles, former world number 1, and the man who turned yelling at umpires into a competitive sport of its own. At his peak, McEnroe's serve and volley game was practically flawless, and so was his ability to get under people's skin. But in 1990, at the Australian Open, even he outdid himself. In a 4th-round match against Mikkel Pernfors, McEnroe started by glaring at a lineswoman after a call he didn't like, and earned a warning for intimidation. No big deal, right? Then he smashed his racket against the ground after losing another point. That's code violation number 2. And then, when chair umpire Jerry Armstrong dared to enforce the rules, McEnroe let fly with some choice words, including the unforgettable, "You're the pits of the world, you know that? Go f*** your mother." And just like that, 3 strikes and automatic disqualification. McEnroe became the first player in Australian Open history to be disqualified under the newly tightened Code of Conduct rules. He left the court to a chorus of boos. Probably thinking he was the real victim here, but history remembers it for what it was. The ultimate John McEnroe moment. Genius on the racket, disaster with his mouth. Nick Kyrgios, a showman with one of the most explosive serves and hands on tour, but also a walking fine waiting to happen. At the 2019 Italian Open against Casper Ruud, Kyrgios was up to his usual, let's call it, antics. After losing a point he thought he deserved, he smashed his racket so hard the strings probably needed therapy. Then he kicked over a water bottle, because hydration clearly offended him that day. But the pièce de résistance? He picked up a chair and threw it right into the middle of the court, while yelling at the umpire and chirping at the crowd for good measure. That was enough for the umpire, who defaulted him mid-match. Kyrgios walked off with a shrug, like he'd just dropped the mic at his own comedy show, while the ATP hit him with a €20,000 fine and ordered him to forfeit over €33,000 in prize money, plus the 45 points he had earned. Some players make headlines for their trophies. Kyrgios made the front page for proving that even furniture isn't safe when he's having a bad day. Novak Djokovic. Novak Djokovic is the Iron Man of tennis with 24 Grand Slam titles and a mental fortress incomparable to anyone on tour. But in 2020 at the US Open, that fortress kind of collapsed. During a fourth-round match versus Carreño Busta, Djokovic dropped serve and, in classic frustrated fashion, smacked a ball behind him without looking. Unfortunately for him, and even more so for her, that ball rocketed straight into a lineswoman's throat. She gasped, stumbled, and fell, leaving the stadium in stunned silence. The umpire and officials quickly gathered. Even Djokovic knew. Game over. He was defaulted on the spot. The top seed, out of the tournament, in one of the most bizarre exits in Grand Slam history. He was also fined a sum of $250,000, which was the total prize money he had earned for reaching the round of 16. No amount of apologies could change the fact that his shot, accidental or not, had just rewritten US Open history for all the wrong reasons, and maybe reminded him, and the rest of us, that in tennis, you're supposed to aim for inside the lines. Jeff Tarango. Jeff Tarango might not be a household name, but in 1995, he earned himself a permanent spot in Wimbledon's Hall of Shame. Ranked number 80 in the world at the time, Tarango had the game, but also a knack for self-destruction. During his third-round match against Alexander Morans, he grew furious over a series of calls by the umpire, starting with a wide serve he claimed was an ace. Clearly annoyed by the audience cheering for his opponent, Tarango yelled at the crowd, telling them to shut up. The chair umpire awarded him a code violation for audible obscenity, but rather than get his head back in the zone, Tarango flat out called the umpire the most corrupt official in the game. This time the umpire had no choice but to give him another code violation, which resulted in a point penalty. And in peak diva form, Tarango threw the two balls in his hands, packed his bags, and walked off the court. But wait, it gets better. Just when everyone thought the drama was over, his wife Benedict found the umpire later and slapped him across the face. That's right, a tag team meltdown. Tarango was fined, suspended, and became a cautionary tale for players who think storming off and sending in backup is a good idea. Spoiler alert, it isn't. Alexander Zverev. Alexander Zverev is an Olympic gold medalist, ATP Finals champ, and the winner of multiple Masters, but occasionally he goes into demolition mode. In 2022, after losing a doubles match at the Mexican Open, Zverev decided the umpire's chair deserved the punishment. First, he unleashed a verbal tirade at the umpire. Then, with surgical precision and zero chill, he smashed his racket into the side of the chair. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, narrowly missing the umpire's feet. Spectators were left wide-eyed, and even his partner, Marcelo Malou, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Tournament officials didn't hesitate. Zverev was defaulted from singles and doubles, fined $40,000, and slapped with a suspended ban. Not exactly the kind of doubles win you want on your resume. It was a masterclass in how to turn losing a match into losing your temper and a chunk of your paycheck, all in under a minute. Andrei Rublev, a quiet killer on court with one of the heaviest forehands in the game. But in Dubai, 2024, that calm exterior cracked, and cracked loudly. After a close line call late in the match against his compatriot Alexander Bublik, Rublev stormed over to the line judge, got right in his face, and unleashed a Russian obscenity so blistering it didn't even need translation. The judge stood there, stone-faced, probably questioning his career choices. The umpire had no choice. Rublev was defaulted on the spot, fined $36,000, and sent packing. His chances at the title gone faster than his temper. It's one thing to argue a call. It's another to shout at a guy like you're auditioning for a mafia movie. And in the end, Rublev learned the hard way. You can't win an argument with the rulebook, even if you yell in Russian. Nick Kyrgios. Yes, it's Nick Kyrgios again. Because when it comes to being disrespectful in tennis, this guy doesn't just make the list. He practically owns it. At the 2019 Cincinnati Masters, Kyrgios was already walking a tightrope after earlier fines that year, but he decided to push things just a little further. Or should we say a lot further. In his second round match against Karen Khachanov, he started by loudly accusing the umpire of being a tool, which, for Kyrgios, is basically a warm-up. He then requested a toilet break, which Murphy, the chair umpire, denied, but he left anyway, knowing full well he would be handed a time violation. Then came the racket smash, and it's not just the regular lazy smash. No, he absolutely annihilated it in the corridor beneath the stands like it had personally insulted his family. And because Kyrgios doesn't believe in leaving anyone out, he also took aim at spectators, barking at a few fans midpoint for distracting him. The umpire tried to calm him down. Kyrgios, predictably, escalated, throwing in more colorful language, more broken equipment, and a few more glares for good measure. When the dust finally settled, he'd racked up a jaw-dropping $113,000 in fines, one of the largest in ATP history, along with the distinction of being the only player who could turn a tennis match into a one-man roast. He was lucky the ATP didn't go ahead with its plan to suspend him for 1 year under the major player offense guidelines. If there were ever a Hall of Fame for creative ways to lose money in tennis, Kyrgios would already have his own wing. Carsten Ariens. Carsten Ariens is not exactly a household name, unless your household keeps a list of the most avoidable tennis meltdowns in history. A solid German pro in the 90s, Ariens had his moment in the spotlight at the 1995 French Open, though for all the wrong reasons. Frustrated after losing a point, Ariens threw his racket to the clay in disgust. Unfortunately, the racket bounced and struck a linesman square on the leg. You'd think he'd stop there, apologize, and move on. But no, not learning his lesson, he threw his racket again, this time even harder, because apparently injuring a linesman once just wasn't enough. The stunned official hobbled away, and the umpire immediately defaulted Ariens from the match. He was fined, and added to tennis trivia history as that guy who couldn't stop throwing his racket at people. To this day, no one remembers who won that match, but everyone remembers the guy who treated the linesman like a clay court target. And for context's sake, that was the second time ever in the history of Grand Slams that a player would be disqualified. Talk about the Hall of the Infamous. Corentin Moutet. If you haven't watched any of Corentin Moutet's matches, you've missed out on plenty of fun and drama. While he is no doubt a very talented player, he is just as fiery and about as subtle as a fire alarm in a library. The Frenchman is known for his creativity on the court, and his creativity in finding new ways to piss everyone off. At the Adelaide International in 2022, Moutet was already simmering after a string of calls he disagreed with. After winning the first set, 6-4, Moutet then had a 4-2 lead in the second before losing it. His frustration reached boiling point during the final game, where he held a 40-0 lead before losing 5 points in a row. It was at this stage that he started to swear towards the direction of the umpire's chair. Then, after yet another disputed point, he erupted like a volcano, turning on the chair umpire with a tirade of F U's loud enough to echo through the stands. But he didn't stop at verbal fireworks. Rather than waiting for the judgment like a professional, the moment he realized what was about to happen, Moutet grabbed his bag, told the umpire exactly what he thought of him, again, and walked off the court mid-match, leaving his opponent, the umpire, and the ball kids standing there like confused extras in a bad movie. The ATP fined him as usual, and probably sent him a gift basket full of anger management pamphlets. If there's a lesson here, It's that while storming off makes for a dramatic exit, it doesn't exactly win you points on the court or with the fans. Tim Henman and Jeremy Bates. Tim Henman, the one and only Mr. Nice Guy of British tennis. In his prime, Tim was widely regarded as the polite, clean-cut hope of Britain, until Wimbledon 1995 reminded everyone that even nice guys have their moments. In a doubles match with partner Jeremy Bates, Henman got frustrated after missing a point, so he smacked a ball in irritation. Unfortunately, that ball rocketed straight into the ear of an unsuspecting ball girl. She dropped to her knees in pain, and the crowd fell silent. Henman immediately ran over to check on her, but the damage was done. The umpire had no choice but to default Henman and Bates from the match, making them the first players disqualified from Wimbledon in over 30 years. To his credit, Henman apologized profusely afterward, sent flowers, and admitted he felt like the biggest idiot of all time, which, to be fair, is a pretty accurate self-assessment. It was a rare blemish on an otherwise squeaky clean career. It was proof that even the nicest guy on tour can have one split second of pure, "What was I thinking?" John McEnroe. Who else could we end with but the original maestro of meltdowns himself, John McEnroe? Because one McEnroe moment simply isn't enough to capture the sheer genius and chaos he brought to the court. This one takes us back to the 1980s at the Stockholm Open. McEnroe was in peak form, his volleys sharp, his temper even sharper. Midway through his semi-final match against Anders Jared, after yet another line call he didn't like, he launched into one of the most infamous tirades in tennis history. He screamed at the umpire so relentlessly, so viciously, that the poor man actually broke down and cried. That's right, McEnroe heckled an umpire into literal tears. Officials reportedly had to stop the match and replace the umpire. Before play could resume, he went on to win the match, and the whole tournament. Imagine reducing an official to tears, and still going on to win the whole thing. It's moments like these that cemented McEnroe not just as one of the greatest players ever, but also as the gold standard for on-court drama. He was a genius with a racket, and a menace with a mouth. Tennis may never see another quite like him, and maybe that's a good thing. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe to the channel, because I'll be posting a lot here. Until next time.